Welcome back, everyone, to another video. Today we are going back in history to 79 AD. It was on this day, August 24th, in 79 AD, that Mount Vesuvius began to erupt, destroying the city of Pompeii and others in the process. Pompeii is the one we remember the most because in the last couple of hundred years they've started to uncover the city of Pompeii, and because of this eruption and the totality and the quickness with which it buried the city of Pompeii, we've had this incredible look into the past because it was preserved so perfectly. So I admit I don't know a ton about the eruption of Pompeii beyond kind of the basics. So I'm here to learn today. Hope you are as well. I'll put a link in the description to the original video, which is by Simple History. They do a great job of telling a story in a short amount of time. So we're going to use that for a video today. If you like what you see and you're new to the channel, please consider hitting that subscribe button. Would love to have you as part of this community. We do a variety of things, reaction videos, but also a lot of original content and live streams as well. So I hope you'll join us. Let's dive in.
The eruption of Mount Vesuvius, Pompeii disaster, 79 AD. At the beginning of 79 AD, the Roman cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum, situated in Campania on the Bay of Naples in southern Italy, were both bustling centers of human activity. Pompeii was a busy commercial center with a population estimated to have been anywhere between 6,400 and 30,000. Herculaneum, on the other hand,
I think the number I've most often seen is probably around 20,000 for the population of Pompeii. A significant sized city at that time. Think about if the city you lived in, I live in a city of about 30,000 people, just got completely buried and destroyed in an instant.
And was a smaller and more exclusive place, popular with the Roman elite, as is attested by the number of luxurious villas that have been discovered there.
Yeah, so Herculaneum's kind of like, it's like Myrtle Beach, or, pick your city, like the place that people get away to. It's the Hamptons. It's the place that the elite of Rome would go for like a vacation home. And it's right there at the base of this volcano. But granted, I don't think Mount Vesuvius had been active for several hundred years at this point. So in generations, nobody thought there was anything to worry about.
By the end of the year, both of them lay buried under meters of volcanic mud and ash, victims of one of the worst geological disasters in recorded history, an event so cataclysmic that it still horrifies almost 2,000 years later, the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. The 1st century AD residents of Campania had little reason to suspect that they were in imminent danger. Vesuvius, which had not erupted in well over 1,000 years, was not considered a source for concern, and its surrounding landscape was as fertile and picturesque then as it is today. The nutriously rich volcanic soil and the Mediterranean climate provided the perfect environment in which to grow an abundance of fruit and vegetables, while the close proximity to the sea meant that fresh seafood was plentiful. Although Roman society of this period was by no means egalitarian, archaeological evidence tells us that even the poor could expect to have a healthy and varied diet. Trade, too, flourished, with evidence supporting the regular export of Pompeian wine and vegetables, again suggesting that there was often a surplus of food. Amphorae filled with goods that were imported from a variety of locations, including Crete, Spain, and Gaza, have been excavated.
So we're not only talking about a wealthy place for the rich to go, place for the wealthy to go in Herculaneum, but we're talking about a place that's abundant in food, a place that's comfortable, that feels safe, that feels on top of the world, that has everything that they need.
The area had long been seen as a playground for the elites of Roman society, and it's known that more than one emperor chose to take his holidays there. Vesuvius itself may not have been viewed as a threat, but the region was geologically active. A large earthquake that occurred in either 62 or 63 AD did significant damage to the buildings of Pompeii, so much so that it's possible that restoration work was still underway in 79 AD. There was no way that the Romans could have known it, but this was almost certainly a precursor to the coming eruption. Smaller tremors occurred regularly and were seen as an inconvenient but minor irritation of daily life, even as they began to increase in frequency. The precise date of the eruption is now contested, but a combination of archaeological and geological evidence gives us a window into how the events unfolded. Remarkably, an eyewitness account has also survived in the form of
Pliny.
2 letters written 25 years after the event by Pliny the Younger, a Roman writer and official, to his friend, the historian Tacitus.
So I believe, if I remember right, Pliny the Younger was actually on a boat. It looks like it's showing it there, kind of offshore, watching this stuff unfold. And that was kind of one of the weird quirks of this whole thing, is that you could be in close proximity to it, but as long as you weren't in the right direction, you could watch it all unfold and you were perfectly safe. But if you were in the wrong place, like in Pompeii, Herculaneum, you were right in the path of that stuff. And it wasn't lava that, most of the time when volcanoes erupt, it's not lava that kills you. It's not like lava's running down and it melts everything. It's the pyroclastic flow. It's this superheated, almost like solid but liquid but gas, and it's like just coming down, and it hits you and just kills you instantly and buries you right where you are. And that's what we see with these people that are buried and perfectly kind of preserved exactly where they were. It destroyed their bodies, but it kind of encapsulated them.
The dates traditionally ascribed to the eruption, the 24th and 25th of August, were taken from a medieval copy of one of Pliny's letters. However, recent archaeological discoveries, including ancient graffiti, coins, and the remains of pomegranates and walnuts, both of which would have been harvested in the autumn, suggest it occurred as late as October. In whichever month it took place, we know that the day of the eruption broke much like any other. Pliny, who was at the time living with his mother and uncle, Pliny the Elder, at Misenum, approximately 30 kilometers from the volcano, tells us that a little after midday, a large dark cloud shaped like a pine tree was seen rising above one of the nearby mountains. Pliny the Elder, who was at the time the commander of the imperial fleet, but is perhaps best known to history for his writings on the natural world, made plans to take a vessel across the bay to investigate the phenomenon. His mission took on a rather more urgent nature when, as he was preparing to set out, he received a message from a friend living at Stabiae, close to Pompeii, begging for assistance. According to Pliny the Younger, several Roman warships then took to the water to mount a rescue mission, not only for his uncle's friend, but also for the refugees attempting to escape from the settlements along the bay. As the ships got closer to the volcanic cinders, which grew thicker and hotter, along with pumice stones and black pieces of burning rock, it rained down on them, and they were in danger of being run aground by the sudden retreat of the sea.
I mean, just imagine what that must have been like. It's throwing out these huge rocks that are landing and destroying things, and it's almost like what you see in the movie 2012, where stuff's like hitting all over the place, and of course never actually hits them. But this must have been just horrifying. It would have been dark. There would have been lightning shooting out of the clouds that were bursting out of the volcano, and then of course once the pyroclastic flow starts, just everything in its path is just gone.
When his ship's pilot advised turning back, Pliny the Elder refused to do so, allegedly proclaiming that fortune favors the brave. Unfortunately, in this case, he was incorrect. It's not known how many people, if any, were saved by the actions of the fleet, but we do know that Pliny the Elder perished in the attempt. The dark, pine tree-shaped cloud was in fact a convective column of ash, rocks, pumice, water vapor, and toxic gases that would eventually rise to more than 30 kilometers in height. Southeasterly winds pushed the column towards Pompeii, blocking out the sun and plunging the doomed city into darkness so complete that Pliny describes it as if the lamp had gone out in a dark room.
Wow.
Within a few hours, the buildings of Pompeii and those residents who had not yet fled were being bombarded by ash, pumice, and other forms of volcanic debris. Throughout this stage of the eruption, Herculaneum, which lay to the west of the mountain, was spared, although its inhabitants would have been more than aware of what was going on. The relative lack of human remains that have been discovered there suggests that many people were able to evacuate during the early stages of the eruption.
Now let's take a look at a map for just a second so we know what we're dealing with here. So here's a modern map here, and of course you see the city of Naples, which is just to the northwest of Mount Vesuvius. So back out a little further, you can see there's Rome. You can kind of see where this sits in Italy. Just on this side of Salerno. So you've got Mount Vesuvius right here. And then you've got Pompeii down in this area, and you've got all of this area that's been preserved, which is just incredible stuff. And then let's take a look and see where Herculaneum is in regards to all of this. So then right here to the west is Herculaneum. It's right close to the sea. So Pompeii's down here, Herculaneum's over here. They're not all that far apart as far as the distance from Mount Vesuvius, but as is often the case with these things, it really just kind of comes down to being in the wrong place versus being in the right place. Same thing happened with Mount St. Helens in 1980. It erupted and exploded in one direction, so you could have been on one side of it and been fine, and on the other side and you were just gone. I mean, that's just how it goes sometimes.
It was long believed that very few people had perished in Herculaneum. This view changed in the early 1980s, however, with the grisly discovery of the extremely well-preserved skeletons of refugees who had taken shelter in several boathouses along the shoreline. The remains of more than 300 individuals have now been identified, and excavations are still going on. Over the course of that day, ash and pumice accumulated in Pompeii at up to 15 centimeters per hour, and after several hours the weight was such that the roofs of the buildings began to collapse. By midnight, the first stage of the eruption, which had seen the formation of the immense column that still towered above Vesuvius, was coming to an end. This first phase has been what scientists now refer to as a Plinian eruption, so named because Pliny provided the first scientific description of one. As the column began to lose its upward momentum, it began to collapse, triggering the first of several pyroclastic flows. These were dense clouds of toxic gases and volcanic matter that reached temperatures of up to 900 degrees Celsius and sped down the mountain at hundreds of miles per hour, collecting debris and annihilating every living thing in their paths.
900 degrees Celsius. Let's see what that is in Fahrenheit for our American audience. So there you go. It's 1,652 degrees Fahrenheit. You can imagine what that does to the human body.
Over the next few hours, 7 of these surges would occur, the first of which spared Pompeii but devastated Herculaneum, killing all those who remained. Pompeii survived the night, but at around 6:30 a.m. it was struck by the 4th surge and buried up to its rooftops. Pliny's account finishes shortly after this with a description of his flight from Misenum and the aftermath of the eruption. You might hear the shrieks of women, the screams of children, and the shouts of men, some calling for their children, others for their parents, others for their husbands, and seeking to recognize each other by the voices that replied.
So in this confusion, in this horrific scene, you've got things landing all over the place that can kill you. You've got people running for their lives. Imagine being a mother separated from her child and you can't find the child. And it's save yourself or go back for the child and you both die. Imagine being the husband trying to find his family and you get separated by the crowd, you get separated by the chaos. You can put that kind of mindset into a lot of events like this. But I think sometimes when we think about these historic events, we think about them in terms of information and timelines and casualty numbers and facts. But it's so important for us to put ourselves on the ground and imagine what this must have been like for the people who were there to experience it. There's nothing interesting or exciting about it. It would have been absolutely horrific.
One lamenting his own fate, another that of his family, some wishing to die. From the very fear of dying, some lifting their hands to the gods, but the greater part convinced that there were now no gods at all, and that the final endless night of which we have heard had come upon the world. But the night did end, and when the sun finally emerged from the darkness, it shone down on a world that looked very different. At last, this dreadful darkness was dissipated by degrees, like a cloud or smoke. The real day returned, and even the sun shone out, though with a lurid light, like when an eclipse is coming on. Every object that presented itself to our eyes, which were extremely weakened, seemed changed, being covered deep with ashes as if with snow. Both Pompeii and Herculaneum were submerged, as were several other settlements. The shoreline around the Bay of Naples had been significantly and permanently altered, and everything was covered in a thick layer of ash. Modern analysis tells us that the eruption may have continued on a reduced scale for several days or even weeks, and that there may have been as many as 20 further surges. It's impossible to determine precisely how many people were killed, but the number is certainly in the thousands. So far, archaeologists have discovered the remains of more than 1,400 individuals who can safely be identified as victims of the eruption, including the skeletons at Herculaneum. Around 25% of Pompeii has yet to be excavated, but assuming that remains continue to be found at a similar rate to the rest of the site, we can estimate that about 2,000 people died there. About 38% of the individuals at Pompeii were found to have died during the earlier stage of the eruption as a result of the ash and pumice deposits. The vast majority of these were found sheltering inside buildings and probably died from asphyxiation or building collapse. The remaining 62% have been discovered in layers associated with the pyroclastic flows that destroyed the city. These people were exposed to temperatures in excess of 250 degrees Celsius. This is hot enough that the thermal shock would have killed them in a fraction of a second.
Yeah, that's the one comfort that can be taken in all of this, is that when these people did die in the pyroclastic flow, it would have been instantaneous. But those people who died in the pyroclastic flow had survived much of the horror of the eruption already. I mean, you've got mothers laying on their kids trying to protect them. It's really, I mean, I'm sure there are other examples, but it's one of the most unique archaeological finds in human history, because very, very rarely do we get a glimpse into 2,000 years ago where we can see exactly where people were and exactly the position that they were in when their lives came to an end.
As the volcanic deposits hardened over the bodies of the dead and their organic matter decomposed, hollows were created within the layers, from which modern archaeologists are able to create detailed plaster casts of the ancient Pompeians, the contorted postures of which are the result of sudden heat-induced contraction of the muscles rather than prolonged agony. The story at Herculaneum was somewhat different. The city was closer to Vesuvius than Pompeii, and as such the pyroclastic flows were much hotter when they reached it. Precisely how the people died there is still being debated, but one theory has it that the intense heat would have instantaneously boiled their blood and brains and vaporized soft tissues. In the case of one victim who was found above ground, the temperature was hot enough to turn at least some of his brain matter to glass. In the immediate aftermath of the disaster, some attempt was made by Rome to provide aid to the citizens of Campania. Emperor Titus visited the region and granted large donations from the imperial treasury. The following year, 2 former consuls were ordered to the region to oversee the relief effort. Despite these attempts, Pompeii and Herculaneum were beyond saving. But contrary to what is commonly believed, neither city was entirely forgotten. At Pompeii, we have clear evidence of people returning to the city in the form of precarious tunnels carved through the ash. Whether these were the actions of the original owners or of opportunistic looters.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I wonder if these are people who, I mean, because there's no rescue effort here. It's not like you think that there are people alive in there. These are probably people looking for, I mean, these were wealthy communities, and there was a lot of wealth in there. They're probably looking for what they can recover and take for themselves.
Is impossible to determine. Centuries later, the names of both cities appeared on a medieval map, presumably copied from an earlier original. Vesuvius has erupted several more times over the millennia, but none of these events have even come close to matching the ferocity of that which occurred in 79 AD. It's perhaps ironic that the force of nature that doomed the ancient Campanians created the perfect conditions for preservation. Pompeii and Herculaneum provided an unparalleled insight into the Roman world, frozen as they were in time. The remarkable condition of their remains, and in particular the plaster casts at Pompeii, which quite literally give a human face to the tragedy that unfolded, bring the past tantalizingly close. Mount Vesuvius still dominates the skyline at the Bay of Naples and is currently considered to be one of the most dangerous active volcanoes in Europe.
This could happen
again. It is a
again.
matter of when, not if, the next eruption occurs. For this reason, the seismic activity of the area is constantly monitored. and evacuation plans have been put in place. Nevertheless, were an eruption of a similar scale to occur today, the lives of up to 3 million people would be endangered, and the city of Naples would potentially meet the same fate as its ancient counterparts.
So let's take a look at some of the images of what they found. So it says this one here is a slave chamber. And you can see right there, and we've got children and adults exactly where they were laying when this all went down. Just incredible glimpse into history. And there are others too. I mean, we can look at, there's an excavation of, looks like their Colosseum, their arena that they would have had. There's incredible excavation of, you can see the columns. This is all the way back in 1876, some of what they found. And here's kind of an overview of a current area where they're doing archaeological excavations. And look at all the walls, the cities, and what they still have. There, you can still see the paint on the inside of the walls. There's a cast of a horse that's been found. Just incredible stuff. So I'd encourage you to check this out. There's some great documentaries about the excavations that you can see for yourself. Really, really cool stuff. Definitely a place that's high on my list of places I hope to visit someday. But as always, in the end, let's remember that this was a disaster that took the lives of thousands of men, women, children, rich and poor. I mean, we saw that. People who were slaves, people who were wealthy and owned those slaves, and kind of everybody in between. So I hope you enjoyed this look at a topic I didn't know a lot about, but I feel like I know a little bit better now. As always, check out the link in the description to the original content. And I hope you'll stick around and check out some more videos. I'll throw up some links to just a couple of things from Roman history that I've done in the past. Thanks for watching.